And welcome to the BC School Centred Mental Health Coalition webinar on school staff wellbeing in British Columbia. I'd like to please join me in acknowledging we live and work on the traditional unceded lands of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish nations. As well, let's acknowledge the traditional unceded First Nations people lands on which you work, live and play. This was being put together by a motley team, all smiling in their pre-COVID days, with pre-COVID haircuts too, I suspect. So thanks very much to that team and to these presenters who will be sharing some of their work and learning with us today. Thanks very much. So just a couple of housekeeping things. There is a chat feature on the system there, which you can use to comment, share resources, approaches, and to pose questions. We can't guarantee we'll answer everything. We may not even know the answers. That's a good reason, but we'll try, and we'll try later as well. So the webinar will be recorded and it will be posted. So just in general, what we're trying to do here are look at 4 specific areas in the webinar. Why bother to address staff wellbeing? We want to try and get a key concept that we've been developing in some of the work here, which is the notion of individual, collaborative and systemic actions to address this issue. We also want to share with you work in 4 districts that illustrates some of these approaches to individual, collaborative and systemic approaches. And we want to put some ideas out about where we actually go from here. So I'm going to hand this over right now to Kim Weatherby, who is joining us from Victoria. And Kim, you're going to address why should we address staff wellbeing.
Hi, everyone. When we start to focus on staff well-being, some people get uncomfortable with moving the focus away from the success and well-being of students. Nonetheless, there are 3 reasons to address staff well-being. It benefits students, the overall education system, and the staff themselves. When school staff are mentally healthy, they are better able to do their job well. We know that teacher well-being is linked to student well-being, engagement, and academic success. Principals and vice principals influence the quality of teaching and learning and have a positive impact on student achievement, school climate, teacher well-being, and retention. In addition to their primary role, all of the adults working in schools and districts build relationships with students that foster school connectedness, which improves student health and educational outcome. And note that all the tiny references you see on the bottom of the screen, those will all be provided in the slide deck that we're going to send you after the webinar today. From a system perspective, there are a number of reasons to actively support the mental well-being of staff. When staff are not doing well, they are less able to excel in their role and less able to consistently provide the support that students need, and that affects the system. Having unwell workers undermines the system's ability to maintain the province's high quality of education. Unwell workers cost the system money in lost productivity, time off work, benefits, TTOC coverage, disability, and turnover. People who experience a great deal of chronic work-related stress are more likely to burn out and leave their positions. If this happens on a regular basis, such positions become less attractive to others, and it becomes difficult to recruit new people into those roles. We're currently seeing this with principals and vice principals and in BC and also across the country. And lastly, employers have a statutory responsibility to provide a safe workplace, including one that is safe for the mental well-being of staff. For school and district staff, poor mental well-being can have negative effects for their career and their lives. Career impacts can include reduced productivity and job satisfaction, deterioration of work relationships, more time off work, and in some cases, leaving their job. Personal impacts can include the range of health issues you see listed on the screen, an unhealthy work-life balance, and the deterioration of family and social connections. It's challenging to find Canadian data that helps us understand the magnitude of staff well-being issues in the education system. Here is what we do know. 65% of BC teachers report being stressed all or most of the time. This compares to 51% of Canadian public service executives and 27% of the total Canadian workforce. There is anecdotal evidence that many people in the BC education system are working long hours. For principals and vice principals, we are able to quantify the situation. In 2017, BC PBPA's members reported a median 60 hours of work per week. This compares to slightly more hours than Alberta and Ontario, almost 5 hours more than Australia, and 9 hours more per week than Canadian public service executives. While most of us have had the odd 60-hour work week, this behavior is not sustainable over the long term. As you can see from the table at the right, the negative health, as you can see from the slide at the right, the negative health impacts of long hours increase with hours worked. When you look at the associated health risks, working 60 hours a week seems like a risky behavior. The last piece of evidence we have is from WorkSafe BC from February of this year. It shows a dramatic increase in mental disorder claims between 2017 and 2019. There's been a 79% increase in mental disorder claims for the education system as a whole, and a 135% increase for teachers and educational assistants. This is quite alarming, as it is more than double the increase in the overall BC workforce, and it is definitely a call to action. Charlie, back to you.
Okay, thanks very much, Kim. One of the, and thanks for sharing some of the reasons why, and the reason we wanted to start with that is often there's a resistance to addressing staff well-being in the mind of the public and media and other things. And sometimes we do need to draw strong connections between staff well-being and the ability of students to learn and to thrive, as well as recognizing that teachers and other staff in school districts deserve to be as well as other people. So this next section is really about the fact that we all have roles in the process to support well-being. I won't read this, but it's one of the things we're really promoting is that all staff are involved. It's not just teachers or principals or support staff, it's all of those together and looking at the community of school. Thanks, Kim. So one of the key things we want to try and get across from this is this notion of shared responsibility and shared action. So we're looking at three approaches that we're trying to promote, and we have some examples of today: the individual, the collaborative, and the systemic. So looking at the individual ways here, these are some examples of individual action. Now, traditionally, I wouldn't say traditionally, but there's been some sense within systems that employers organize, big system people want the individual to take action, the individual wants the system to take action. We're trying to break through that a little bit by saying all three can act together. So these are examples of both looking after oneself, but also as an individual, keeping an eye out for others and just touching base with others and looking after and caring for others. So they're just some examples of those. On the collaborative side of things, we have some possibilities of small groups who have got together to look at a staff wellbeing program. So for instance, a group in Powell River did access one of the teacher inquiry grants from the BCTF to look at staff wellbeing over a year in their school. A book study group has occurred in some areas, and I know both Sooke and Powell River have been moving to have school champions who can be supporters of collaborative action in schools. There can be a bit of a conduit for dialogue and communication about that. And looking at the systemic side here, again, what we're saying is that school districts can actually get directly involved in this and can play a key part. Including staff wellbeing in a strategic plan is a good start. Having some staffing and budgets to support staff wellbeing, which some districts are doing. They can also enable and support the individual and the collaborative sides. But I think really importantly, to engage and listen to staff to understand issues and the possibilities there. Okay, next slide. So what we're going to do now, much more exciting than my bit, is to go on a virtual tour of British Columbia, or at least 4 districts there, and we're going to kind of touch base and hear from them some of the things they are doing that link to these ideas of individual, collaborative, or systemic. So we're going to take a trip to the eastern edge of metropolitan Vancouver area now. We're going to Langley. So Megan, really nice to see an HR person here, and Gail, who's involved with the SEL work in Langley there. It'd be great to hear from you. Over to you, Langley.
All right. Thanks, Charlie. It's so fun to see everybody here. Yeah, I'd like to start with the fact that we started initially with this cross-department team, which I think was so very powerful for our work together. So myself and Megan, and also Renge Bailey, who's the district principal for student support services in Langley, and a Fraser Health partner. So that was great. I think that was a really powerful way to begin. We've done 2 years of sort of evening learning sessions. The first one was really focused on social emotional learning, with that awareness that social emotional learning starts with the adults. And then the second year was very much focused on staff well-being. So Megan's going to tell you a little bit about that year. We also had this really wonderful opportunity to be part of a coaching project that was part of the Well Ahead initiative, which is an initiative of the McConnell Foundation. And that gave us a chance to work not only with a coach, which was Charlie, thanks Charlie, but also coordinating with other BC districts. And that was really, really valuable for us to learn from what other districts were doing and to share what we were doing with them. We also, partway through as we were doing that coaching project, applied for and received a really generous grant from the McConnell Foundation to do a project, the same project really, but the idea was to focus on how to increase student well-being by focusing on staff well-being. And so that connected us with other organizations doing similar but slightly different work across Canada, and gave us that power of the cross-Canada connection as well. That was really helpful. We did some focus groups, really borrowing the idea from Powell River. So I think they're going to talk a little bit more about that. Well-being, staff well-being is now in our district a strategic plan, which is really very exciting. At the moment, we are working with a HR consultant who's helping us kind of consolidate a plan, a strategic plan sort of going forward in this work, which I think we're quite excited about and is going to be really helpful. We are definitely a work in progress, but it's been quite a journey so far. And I'll hand off to Megan to tell you a little bit more in detail around our work with teacher well-being. Go, Megan.
I think if we've lost Megan, could you carry on?
No, you know what? I'm good. I wasn't able to take myself off mute. Sorry.
Sorry, Megan.
No, that's okay. So in 2018, we were lucky enough to meet Saber-Chirkowski. She is an associate professor and director at the UBCO, and she works with mindful engagement, and she really focuses her work on teacher well-being. So initially we got our schools together, realizing that we each had unique cultures and all had really wonderful things to bring. And we had the schools work as a teams. We did wonderful evenings with beautiful meals at golf courses where each team and school worked on their own projects that were unique, but we also had a lot of conversations in the similarities, the differences, and just fascinating work where people talked about their ideas. And unfortunately, with everything going on, we haven't had a chance to bring everyone back together, but we will definitely continue to build on what schools are doing and share the outcomes of that.
Thanks very much to both Gail and Megan for this. And I was out just as an observer a couple of the sessions with Sabra, and it's quite exciting to see about 150 people, staff from all over the districts at these sessions. So that's pretty impressive. Okay, so we're going to take a short hop over on that tiny plane that flies up to Powell River, and we're zooming over the Sunshine Coast, and we're just about to land. And here is to greet us, Millie. Millie Ing, the recently newly PhD Dr. Millie Ing, I should add, and welcome, Millie.
Hi, Charlie. Thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Millie, and I'm going to present on what we've done in Powell River. So well-being can be understood as how people feel and how they function both on a personal and a social level, and how they evaluate their lives as a whole. But once we looked beyond the definition, it was difficult to drill down into what well-being really means to people day to day, the factors that influence it, how we can best measure it, and how we can support people to improve it. So where did we start as a school district? In our school district, wellness approaches were provided by the district for staff, but there was limited uptake. So in the fall of 2017, to ascertain if staff well-being was a priority, we had initial consultations with district management, union, teachers, and educational assistants. These consultations deepened our understanding of the context and culture of our district. And because staff well-being was a priority, elementary teachers, secondary teachers, educational assistants, and school-based administrators were interviewed in focus groups in 2018. They were asked to reflect on how individual, collaborative, and systemic factors influence their well-being, and what schools and all the district could do to support staff well-being. The next slide, please. So after analyzing shared consultation findings and focus group data, improving professional relationships emerged as a priority on staff well-being for all 4 groups. As these findings were meaningful and reflective of the needs of the staff, the school district funded a professional relations learning group. Next slide. 6 sessions were planned for the 2019-2020 year. All were held after school, but with 3 half-day release days accessible to participants. Communication, dialogue, facilitation skills were shared so that these skills could be utilized to improve individual practice in school environments and professionally focused conversations. The learning group was open to teachers and educational assistants. Indeed, truly, we learned that collecting, reflecting, and acting on data helped deepen our understanding on how staff well-being could be supported in meaningful ways and why this was important to staff in our school district. And I'm done. Over to you, Charlie.
Okay, thank you very much, Millie. And I think it may be useful for people to know that Langley, Powell River and Sooke have had something of a connection through the McConnell support during the coaching period of the 2 years, which just closed just before the start of this school year. So there is a little bit of a connection, a little bit of learning from each other in that, and some understanding that each district goes about this in its own way and finds its own approach to it. So we're flying back over the Salish Sea now. We're going to visit the wonderful town and city of Victoria, and Lisa is going to share some of the work she's done in Victoria with you now.
Hey everybody, thanks Charlie. My name is Lisa Baylis. I'm a high school teacher and counselor in the Greater Victoria area. And I want to talk a little bit about one of the programs that we did here, which is what we call the Mindfulness for Educators program. And actually it touches on all 3 components. It started with a BCTF inquiry grant with a whole bunch of educators saying, you know, we really believe mindfulness is going to be a key component to supporting the awareness of educators. How do we do it? And it turned into sort of a growing process of educators coming together saying we want to do this. And so we collaborated together, we came up with a program, and then the district paid for it. So what it turned into be was an 8-week mindfulness program based on the MBSR, which is Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction Program. My co-facilitator and I, we've run this program, her name's Stephanie Curran, and she would teach that 8-week course. And what we realized was that a lot of educators wanted to take these practices to their students. We're student-focused as teachers. We know that that's what they want, but we didn't really have that practice for ourselves. We wanted to give that opportunity to really embody it and really understand it for ourselves. Once participants finished the 8 weeks, then they came and we met together. So I came in, we had 3 to 4 sessions that then said, now how do we engage our students? How do we connect them? How do we bring this to our classrooms? The neat thing about this is it incorporated all groups. So we had EAs, we had teachers, we had counselors, we had administrators, we had grounds crew coming in, and everybody was invited to these programs. We've had 6 different cohorts just here in Victoria, and they've all been fully funded at a system level through the district. We've also been able, because we've trained over 120 educators just here, we've been able to build things like grad programs, which is like bringing people who've been through their program back and deepening their language and their knowledge. And we've also had booster sessions. So you've had a practice, you want to continue it, let's keep going together. You can see by some of the participants' feedback here is one of the things that they noticed is even before they started teaching, the practices to their students, they realized that it was having an impact on themselves first, that they were being able to feel calmer, more able to respond in difficult situations, and then be able to be present and purposeful with their students in their classrooms. The neat thing about this is that it's ongoing, and we've supported not only Victoria, but we've also been in Sooke, Saanich, the Francophone schools, and some of the private schools around the Greater Victoria area. We've also built in components of being mindfully trauma-informed, as well as a deep practice around self-compassion, which has been a real influence and strength for me. I really love that piece. The other piece that's really neat is that because of COVID and in this time right now, we've realized that we've needed to shift a little bit. Our last cohort here in Victoria finished the 8 weeks with Stephanie just before we went into spring break. But then they continued with me, and we did it in an online format. And we looked at how do we now bring mindfulness to continue it for ourselves and teach it to our students through this online platform. And we realized that there was still a need and still a want to do that. So it was a really exciting program. We're looking to expand it next year. It's going to continue as an online program for our district, and it's still being funded. So although we've had we keep thinking we're going to hit a saturation point. We haven't. Our district continues to fund it and continues to support this as a practice to support our individual well-being, really embodying these practices first before then we take them back into our classroom and with our other colleagues. I'd love to talk about it. If you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you very much, Lisa. We're going to take a very short drive now, actually, up the road from Victoria out to the western burbs there, and we're going to meet David and Cindy from Sooke. So over to you, David.
Thank you, Charlie, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dave Strange, Associate Superintendent in the Sooke School District, and super happy to be here today. Super passionate about this work, and very pleased to see Gail and Lisa and Millie and others that we've been connected for quite a while on this journey in various places. Just speaking to a little bit of our experience in Sooke, certainly as one of the fastest growing districts on the island, we're really feeling the impacts of what growth looks like as we move from a small district to now an ever-growing district that seems to just keep on growing. And with that has become a real, similar to most of the people that are on this, a real need to pay attention to well-being. And what started as that conversation about students quickly went back to, we need to start with looking at our staff. That this idea of training our staff to help kids feel well really starts with us understanding how to ensure that our staff are feeling well and creating those conditions for thriving, and looking at that as every learner within our system, not just the students that ultimately were mandated to help find success. So it's been an exciting journey and really well supported. I think some of the things that we just wanted to highlight, and I'm going to have Lisa make my slides next time because those look so beautiful, really was understanding that what is good for students is also good for staff, and starting with staff is important, whether we're looking at this through SEL, mental well-being, self-regulation, and so on. What we realized, though, our past history within our district oftentimes was a top-down approach, and here's what wellness is, and it was almost doing wellness to people as opposed to exploring what wellness might be with people. And I think that's the thing that's really changed, and you'll see on this slide, just looking at that idea of how do we engage in multifaceted engagement process where we're really giving voice to our various education partners within our system. So we've really focused on that this last couple of years, beginning with a district-wide workplace engagement survey that informed our strategic plan, but then branching out and looking at the other data sets that are there from our provincial partners, and also similar to Langley and Powell River, engaging with Charlie through a focus group process with our education partners, and really being mindful that we wanted authentic consultation, that this wasn't about me in an executive role or managers going out and tapping into staff to have a conversation, but actually removing ourselves from that to create a safe space for conversation. And that's been really exciting as we're starting to learn what it is that people are feeling and thinking out there. While we've been doing that, we certainly recognize that we're aiming towards building something that's scalable and sustainable. that this is not just quick short-term actions, but we've recognized that you have to have some things that are happening. So we've been engaged in, similarly in partnership with Lisa and Stephanie Kern, around some mindfulness work that we've done for staff, offerings of fitness classes, those usual things. We've developed school-based health champs that are engaging in conversations at schools to give us more of a sense of what's needed. But I'm excited too that our district has really stepped up. Our board and our executive are super supportive of this, to the point where coming into this September, we'll now have a district principal of safe and healthy schools. That we do have a small district team that's now in place to support this work moving forward. And we have budgets that we wouldn't have had in the past. So we're moving away from, this is something we assume we do and do off the side of our desk, to where we're developing an infrastructure to build a longer term framework that's there. And that's been helped by really getting this as a priority within our strategic plan. It's a highlighted area in terms of well-being, health and safety for staff, students, and families, and specific to that. So we have something to reference back to that is a call to action, and provide some accountability to the district to move that. Charlie, I'm assuming you're in charge of the slides, or am I?
No, I'm not in charge of anything, actually. That's
Oh, there you go.
I just do what I'm told.
Really, that's kind of what I do. Cindy tells me what to do all the time, so it's good. Second slide here, just this idea, and I'll try to get out of the way very quickly because people have questions and conversation on that. But recognizing that there's no quick fixes, there's no simple answers, and I think sometimes we've fallen into that trap. And I want to assign that to everyone on this call, but certainly it's been our experience that sometimes a program will come along, or a champion, or the new flavor of the day, and we've jumped on that, and then it's quickly fizzled out. So we're really trying to move away from simply being reactive to being thoughtful in our planning and looking at scalable and sustainable approaches that develop a culture of wellness. This is not a program we're doing, this is a way of being that we're aiming for. And there's always that tension, right? That tension of, what are you doing right now? What is the action that we can see? And trying to help bring people into that narrative that actually thoughtful planning and consultation is meaningful action and is going to get us to a better place. Next slide. And I guess finally, I'll jump out of this, but stating the obvious that, you know, in this wellness journey, self-care is important. But just putting that message out there is insufficient. We can give reams of advice on self-help, you know, in terms of what people can do as individuals. But speaking to Charlie's slides and some of the work that we've been doing, that it's not sufficient to just put this on our individual staff members. We can help them develop those skills and provide access to opportunity for individual action, but we really want to develop something that looks and says, yes, you have a personal responsibility, but what are the opportunities to collaborate with others within the system to take care of yourself? And then from the collective perspective, what is the district's responsibility in terms of providing the fertile ground? And you'll see the slide there. It's one thing to take care of yourself, it's the other, and our responsibility that the district is taking seriously to create that fertile ground for people to grow and to be healthy. But as I stated, I think our one big learning and our one big commitment is that we can't build this from the top and just push it on people. So we're really engaged in that active collaboration with our QP union, our teachers association, our PVP group, our exempt staff, and our parent community to develop something together. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dave. Before we leave, Sooke, there was something that you didn't mention that I've seen go on there, which is this fairly significant collaboration with the Island Health Authority and with community organisations. Cindy, would you mind just speaking to that for a moment, please?
Sure, Charlie, and that's part of our larger Healthy Schools, Healthy People efforts, but it certainly it's a good example of the fact that no one system is going to be able to do all that needs to get done, and to use the model of the day, especially under COVID, is we're stronger together. And so community partners and services as part of our overall healthy schools efforts is a really important part of that. So really purposely and deeply strengthening relationships with key partners, and partners who have said, you know, we're more about focused on the kids, but we also know the staff matters. So let us know when you know how we can help. An example of that might be, for instance, our recreation community partners in the community, doing something specific to meet the needs of staff who've identified that. So while it is early days in terms of drawing in the community partners for the sake of staff well-being, relationship building, the work we've done that's been focused more or less on our younger learners, really does sort of till the soil, if you will, for future engagement with our community partners. It's just part and parcel of supporting everybody in our school community, including the adults. So hope that helps.
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much, Cindy. Before we move on to the resources, I just wanted to do a very quick review of what we've talked about so far. So one of the things we're really focusing on here is this point about individual, collaborative and systemic actions, the inclusion of all groups in staff wellbeing approaches, so that we include everybody who's a staff person in the district. I think some of the points about the strategy and the representation and participation of senior members of the school district is really important. The connection and partnerships with others, whether it's unions, associations, or health authority organisations, internal and external collaborations have certainly come up. It's been interesting that at least two of the groups there access union grants for staff wellbeing projects. There's money around in unions and in districts. They're not going to wave it around in front of you, but sometimes if you can look for PD funding or other funding, it's really worth looking for. I think too, the innate connections of things like mindfulness, so that there are other aspects to the well-being, wider aspects than we might initially consider, are worth thinking. And I think too, the current COVID context and impact is going to be is significant now and possibly will be in the future. So I think, I think there's a great deal emerging from the districts that we're hearing from so far, and doubtless down the track there'll be much more we can learn from other districts. So we'll move on now to the resources part of the webinar. And what we've done here is we've just put a few resources which are accessible from EdCan, the Education Canada. There's quite a lot of BC material on this site, some of which quite a few people on this webinar have contributed to or participated in. One thing we might just flag for you is the actual Well Ahead conference, which actually is in November, not October. It's November 2nd to 4th in Edmonton, and that was to be held in May this year, but obviously was cancelled or postponed because of COVID. Now there will be fairly straight or soon after this webinar ends a resource list, which Kim Weatherby's done a fantastic job on producing. And this list has got a list of resources which shows you kind of both the media in which they are, and she's got beautiful flags for BC and Canada to show you where they come from. I suggested a kangaroo for Australia, but that didn't wash, so we just have Canada and BC flags. But those are some of the resources that are going. So you'll have those and full access to those down the track. So in terms of where we go from here, this is perhaps something that we can just start a bit of discussion today, in which people may well contribute to, both in the chat and in further connections which we hope to make. So in terms of where we do go from here, we'd like to ask these questions. And again, we're not going to get all of these things answered today, clearly, but we'd like to at least flag these for you. What do you need in your efforts to support staff wellbeing? we're not asking that because we're going to suddenly land and provide the answers for you, but we'd like to get a sense of what the needs are across the province and if something can be pulled together for that. Would you like to keep connected about this issue in the longer term, and if so, how? One of the things that we are considering doing, and actually a fair bit of work has gone into this, is to create a network that school districts could support by putting some resources into in exchange for access to a network with support where some of these ideas across BC and from across Canada and internationally can be shared. So if that moves, one of the ideas there would be to use some of the money for staff release time, whether for teachers or other staff, and half to support the network activities. We'll get more details on that as the thinking evolves and becomes a little clearer. But one of the things we really ask you to consider is, where do you think we should go? There is something of a network already. We'd like to really extend that network. We'd like to try and create more connections and more learning. I think one of the things we have failed to do in BC is learn effectively across networks from each other, and we'd like to put that right in a small way with this work. So if you can answer in whichever way, there will be a survey going out following this webinar. There is an email there that you can share ideas on, and there is of course the chat line there. So thank you for that. And I think we've actually been so anxious about the time, we're getting through things too quickly. So there we go. Maybe Amy, I'm not sure if there will be some questions pop up down the track, but before we go to those, I'd like to invite 3 people who've kindly volunteered to share some of their thoughts on the reflections on what has occurred today, or what we've shared a little bit today, and what they hope for the future. And we sort of asked these people quite deliberately, in a sense, because we wanted to bring different perspectives, different voices into this webinar. So Laura Dixon is a trustee from Delta School District in Metropolitan Vancouver. Dave MacKenzie is a counsellor in Vernon School District, but he's also the president of the School Counsellors Provincial Specialist Association of the BCTF. And Sandra, we're very pleased to welcome you also as the Mental Wellness Coordinator for Cariboo-Chilcotin School District. So we're going to ask you, if you wouldn't mind, and we can relax the time a little bit for you, but don't go berserk on this, because we're in front. So Laura, if you are with us right now, would you like to share your reflection and your hope?
Thanks so much, Charlie, and everybody for joining us today. Following Charlie's narrative, you've now caught the ferry from the island, and I happen to be sitting in Tsawwassen and on the traditional territory of the Tsawwassen First Nations and Musqueam people and all the Hunkaminam speaking people. So good afternoon. I was asked to reflect on the event, and of course you have to be part of the event in order to reflect on it. So I really love these specific examples and programs, but as a trustee, my lens would be to think about what are those specific initiatives attached to. So beyond your district vision or your strategic plan, you might have some language that sits there. Do you know if your operational planning creates those professional structures that are authentically collaborative? Are they grassroots led? Do they increase collegial connectedness? Do your programs and structures help staff identify with the collective efficacy of their work and their ability to affect positive outcomes and increased wellness for each other and for their students? Here I'm thinking about, as specific examples, I'm thinking about teacher-led and school-based goals and planning. That should be grassroots. Assessment for learning practices, building those relationships and that collective efficacy between teachers and between teachers and students when they're planning. Mentorship groups, creation of embedded school-based and funded staff time. So those are the things you can attach your wellness programs to when it's part of your district culture. So for me, this is really about a district culture question. Then my wish would be that we move well past this as an issue of language and a collective agreement. Our view of staff wellness has to take that whole systems approach in investing in our collective well-being. one, you know, our district, we have an all stakeholders committee. It's one step. Our school-based positions are another. But let's make sure that everybody in the buildings know that their actions can support others, and that others in turn are there to support you.
Thanks very much, Laura. Interesting perspectives. I mean, one of the things you brought up there was culture, and certainly in some of the work we've been doing, we found this exploration of culture to be central to the issue of well-being in the district. But it's also a tough nut to open up sometimes. There are sensitivities about culture. If you ask 10 people in a school district what the culture is, you could well get 10 different answers. So I think this whole exploration of culture could be something to, you know, to perhaps try and focus on a little more in the future. But thank you very much for your reflections. Dave, we've got to take a slightly longer flight now. We're heading over the what's that damn pass now called? I've forgotten it. Anyway, the connector and the pass there, and it's supposed to be snowing up there today, Dave, but I hope you're safe and warm in Vernon. So over to you.
Thanks, Charlie. And as well, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm currently working and learning and about to play on the traditional territory of the Okanagan people, and specifically the Syilx people of the North Okanagan. For me, the reflection that I'd like to share is I really appreciate the sort of the focus on the integration of staff well-being in school districts that includes both the individual, the collaborative, and the systemic. That model truly reflects the various perspectives that need to be included in any plan that is going to address staff wellness. It recognizes and acknowledges that from each of those perspectives, there's valued opinions and information that each of those perspectives can provide. If you will, if each of those people had paintbrushes, they're contributing to the same picture that they're trying to create for a district in terms of the wellness for a particular district and the staff that work to support kids and families in that region. And it also, in my mind, recognizes the strength and the value that each of those components have for the overall success. For a hope, I hope that that there is an awakening or a recognition that this is an appropriate, if not a necessary structure that any initiative around wellness needs to take in any district. And I guess my additional hope is that that districts don't just assume and take this on and say, okay, this is what's worked in other places, so we're going to do it here. Districts that have managed to use this as their perspective to develop their plan have come to this and recognize that that it actually does make sense, understanding their context. So I'm really grateful that this is the perspective that highlights the successes that have happened around the province and is a model for other districts to follow.
Thank you very much, Dave. Because it was the Coca-Cola I was trying to remember, for some reason it went totally out of mind. Can't get good stuff these days. It's one of those things. Okay, so we'll do we'll travel up north now, or further north in British Columbia. Again, one of the things we're trying to think through with this work is what's different in metropolitan, what's different in northern and other areas of the province. So, so we're very pleased to welcome Sandra Scott. And Sandra, if you would be willing to share your reflections from the perspective of your work in School District 27, Cariboo-Chilcotin.
Thank you, Charles. I too want to recognize that I work and play on the ceded territory of the Secwepemc Nation. And yeah, I'm just happy to share a little bit of my thoughts. I am a bit of a stat nut, so I really appreciated the stats that were presented at the beginning of this presentation because I felt they were really succinct and right to the point regarding when we're looking at why are we doing this. And right now, I think in our district, it's very, we're wondering, are we going to continue putting money into this area? and when I'm doing a proposal, those stats are really, really important. Those are things that parents want to hear about. The trustees want to hear if they're going to be looking at where they're going to put their money. So I think that was really valuable for me. And it was also interesting to hear what was happening in other districts. And again, for me, what went throughout each of the presentations was collaboration. That's so important. Again, something that we don't do to people, but we do with them, and support. So that is something that's starting to work its way into our collective agreement in our language for our teachers in our districts. So I'm hoping that that will be a focus area, like staff wellness in that collaboration time, and how that can affect the wellness of the students. As far as a wish, and I know this is a big wish, and when I think about it, the word mandatory comes to mind. That, yeah, we need to look at staff wellness, not just off the side of someone's desk, or, you know, we all know that the Ministry of Mental Health has given money to the to the school districts. How that money is being used isn't always that transparent. I think it needs to, positions need to be created in every district where that person's job is looking out for the wellness of the staff, beyond just our HR, you know, employee person. So again, where does that money come from? How do we make sure it's equitable across districts is a big question that I think I don't have the answers to, but I am curious about. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandra, and to Laura and to Dave. Thank you all very much for both being here and sharing your thoughts. What we're going to do now is one of our great team, Amy, has been monitoring the chat lines, and she is going to share with us a couple of one or two perspectives from the chat lines, and if people wish to react to those or add comments to those or add questions that you'd like to pose now, or comments you'd like to share. So Amy, could we go over to you?
Yeah, for sure. There were just two questions I'll just mention that came up, and then a few reflections from folks. So there was a question for Lisa. I'll just repeat that for anyone who missed it in the chat. Someone asked if employees were paid for attending the mindfulness sessions, and Lisa, you can add anything, but it sounded like it was voluntary, but folks didn't have to pay to attend the sessions.
Yep, that's right. It was, thank you. It was offered to all staff, and it was an option that they could choose, but nobody was paid for their time, and it wasn't after school. And it was a fairly large commitment. What we did see is a strong retention, though, of that program. And most people, well, you know, in fact, almost every cohort, everyone stayed through it because they found the practice is so powerful. And then the other piece, I'm not sure, we actually had it researched through Royal Roads through the whole thing. So for the last 5 years, it's been researched. So people were able to share their comments throughout the process and learn a lot about that and how it really went back to their classrooms and how it supported themselves through it.
Could I just add something there, Amy, before you move on to the next one? That this issue of staff time and whether people are paid or not is a really interesting one. One of the things that Powell River did was, although for the learning group they had the sessions after school, each participant got equivalent of 3 half days release time that they could take at their will. And the idea of that was it was very difficult to find TOC staff you know, all at the same time, but at the same time it gave staff some time for that. And in Sooke, the focus group, the support staff recipients were paid to participate in the focus group. So there are sometimes some creative possibilities to actually, you know, recognize people's time. But thanks, Lisa. So Amy, sorry, back to you.
There was also a question from Dave. What metrics are school districts using to assess the impact of the focus on staff wellness? Dave, we'll let you add anything if I didn't quite capture that right.
Yeah, could you add to that a little and elaborate on that, please?
Sure. You know, I think if there's a criticism generally of education is we have lots of metrics, but we don't always use them to determine whether what we're doing is making a difference or not. I think anecdotally, people would who are involved in wellness programs would probably comment, and as Lisa mentioned, people stick with a program if it's making an impact for them. But you know, as districts take this on as a district focus, I'm wondering what kinds of metrics the districts that have had success have been using to be able to demonstrate or at least validate that the work that they're doing is making an impact.
So, would, I don't know, David, would you like to consider that from Sooke's perspective?
Absolutely, from one Dave to another. It's a great question, Dave, and I think full transparency from our district, I'm going to talk to my wife about running water now. I don't know that we've really wrapped our heads around what progress or success indicators look like at a district level, especially as it relates to staff wellness. I think we have a plethora of data that we work with relative to student connection and wellness and are becoming much better in terms of evidence informed and in our actions. I think for the Sooke School District right now, that's going to be a key part of our work as we collaboratively co-create this framework of moving forward and really digging into what are some meaningful indicators of success that, you know, the fallback oftentimes when we look at this through past perspectives is, well, let's just monitor our staff absenteeism. But what we're wanting to look at is, it's not simply whether staff are at work more, it's are they thriving when they're at work, and what does that look like? So I'm just as curious as you are in terms of our district. What are we going to establish as our success indicators so that we can have a feedback loop that makes sure that our investment in this actually has a meaningful outcome?
Charlie, may I speak to this?
Yeah, go ahead, Kim.
This is a pretty new area in BC for the education system. So right now, I don't think there are many districts who are have a strong approach in this area. We're just beginning. In other sectors in workplace well-being, there are measures that are used, and they focus on, you know, often there are surveys, but they're checking in on people's engagement with work, satisfaction, kind of the things that you might almost see in the student survey, but a regular checking in with people on how they're doing and how they're feeling. And that would be addition to the measures that Dave said around turnover, time away from work, and those kind of things. So in lots of organizations, it's kind of a combination of factors.
So I also see on the chat line, Shirley, hi to Shirley Giroux, I think in Prince George there, who also recently completed a PhD thesis on staff wellbeing and ideas. So if you haven't read that, it's a good read in Education Canada. But she's mentioning the Pro-QOL and teacher stress inventory. And Whitaker also mentioned the EDI and MDI satisfaction surveys. I think Sooke also did the employee satisfaction survey, I think from one of the ministries there, or Stats BC, I think they use that. But David, it's a really interesting question, this, how you manage it. I think David Strange's point about being a difference between being there and thriving is a good one. So I think we're not necessarily always looking for absolutes like absence or presence, but the quality of work and the satisfaction of people within those roles and their well-being. So I think there's some very interesting ideas coming out from that. Sorry, David, go ahead.
If I could just add a piece, part of the reason for asking the question is this is for some districts, they've been on this journey for quite some time, and it started to become a part of the culture of the district. And the part of the culture, if it includes staff wellness and a focus on this, the culture sometimes carries initiatives through lean times, both in terms of motivation and interest and money. But what also carries things through those lean times is good data that suggests that what you're doing is making an impact, and that if you make a decision to cut that initiative with the data, you can clearly identify what you're going to lose. And then it becomes a more objective decision and a cost-benefit analysis about, is this worth giving up given what we're going to lose? Or is it worth investing more so that we can gain more? I recognize this is new for education, generally speaking, to be this intentional about it. And that intentionality, I think, is good. The intentionality on making sure that we have ways of demonstrating its effectiveness beyond an anecdotal comment, which is incredibly powerful. Stories are incredibly powerful, but the data in some environments and education is the only thing that makes a decision one way or the other.
Thanks very much, David. Yeah.
Charlie, can I just mention a little bit of what I've done in our district this last year? I had a look at the teacher well-being audit online, and I sort of tailored it a little bit to our district, sent that out to the staff, and then so that would be a baseline. It was it's centered around 5 pillars of teacher well-being: emotions, engagement, accomplishment, meaning, and relationships. And what I looked at is with each staff, which pillars were stronger, which pillars maybe they were challenged on, that they might need some support with. And with that audit comes with specific techniques for addressing each one of those pillars. So then we would implement 1 or 2 of those strategies in consultation with the staff of what they thought would be supportive for them. And then the plan is to administer it again, the overall well-being audit at the end of the year after the initiatives were in place, to have a look at, okay, have we moved up this scale or not? So to me, being again that stat person that wants to see the numbers behind and some evidence beyond the really good stories, that was one way that I was able to do that.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I think one of the things coming from that is I'd like to see more of what you've done there, if you could share that, and I'm sure other people will be really interested. So part of this webinar is really to just open up to understanding there are many sources of information and resources in this province that we can access, and if you're willing to share some of that, we'll try and make sure it's accessible to more people. So thank you very much. Have we got time for one more, Amy, perhaps question or perspective from one of our participants? We are monitoring the chat, so if any comments come in, we will assimilate those. So thanks to people who've contributed ideas so far. Amy?
Yeah, Terry had mentioned the importance of linking to a district strategic plan and having it be informed by partners. And Anne had also added in that support from the board is important too. So I'm not sure if Terry or Anne wanted to add anything on that, or if there was any other comments.
So Terry or Anne, would you like to jump in there?
Well, thank you, Anne from School District 61. I would say that for our district, it has been critically important and has been key to the success of the program that Lisa's been running, is that there has been a strong support from the board. It has been in the strategic plan for the last 6 years. So that allows for decision making at an operational level that clearly directs resources towards that programming. And it also makes it a focus of data where we do look at the EDI and the MDI, where that's not directly related to the teachers, teachers directly putting in that data. For the board, the final result that we're always looking at is student success. And we do see success with our students because of the work that we're doing. I think we see it in less anxiety, and how they're being dealt with, and especially in the satisfaction surveys. We do also see comments that kids are feeling safer and happier in class, and just feel more joyful. So I really think it's important that if you're wanting to move something forward in your district and you're not getting that help or support, that look towards the board and that strategic plan, because that can be key to just changing that culture and that direction by providing the resources.
Okay, thanks very much, Anne. Appreciate that. Again, that point just illustrates the fact that several districts in BC do have staff wellbeing in their strategic plan. I don't know what they all are. I don't know what's in them. Maybe I'm a little slow on the uptake, but it would be great if we could pull these together and share them. So if people want to put it in their strategic plan, they've got some ideas.
Yes.
So on that point, I think, oh, Terry, did you wish to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, well-being is one of the priorities in our strategic plan, and we don't focus just on educator well-being or staff well-being, but well-being for all of our adult and student learners. And I think it is a critical piece to have that coordinated, systemic way of being able to look at well-being, resilience, and gratitude. Like, those things are very much linked together, that compassion and flourishing. The other thing I just add is there's been some discourse in the chat and in the comments about quantitative data versus qualitative. I think it's important not to discount, particularly when we're talking about the humanness of well-being, to discount qualitative data as not critical and important. And in fact, it's incredibly valuable data. How it is that we gather that data and how it is that we make sense and make meaning of it and use it to inform our work, that's the critical piece. Data is not an end to itself. It's about how we use the data to make decisions, to be able to be responsive to needs, to adjust and to iterate our plans.
Thank you, Terry. Could I just check where you're from, Terry, again?
I'm the Superintendent, Secretary, Treasurer, Director of HR, Director of Communications in School District 10, Arrow Lakes, a rural district, and a former school counselor.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm sorry, I just couldn't find my list and I couldn't remember everybody. My apologies, but great to hear from you. Do you want a few more jobs there? Sounds like you've got quite a few responsibilities, but good for you. Thank you very much. And thanks to everybody for, I'd particularly like to thank the team who put this together. I think they did a great lot of work on this. Thank you to all the people who shared their work and learning in the 4 school districts. And thanks to our 3 respondents, and thanks to everybody for participating today. There will be a message sent out to you within the next little while. And that will include a survey with some questions about this. It will include the whole slide deck so you can access anything on it. The session has been recorded. That will be accessible should you wish to go for a replay while you get your popcorn and enjoy the show. So thank you all. It's been a pleasure to touch base. I hope we can continue and expand the connections in the interest of staff wellbeing, and promote this across the province of British Columbia. So thank you very much indeed.